Hi there everyone at Grimsby Neighbourhood Church. I'm Stuart Blount and I'm Elim's Director of Ministry, and Pastor Sue has asked me to share this message with you via video, and I'm really pleased to be able to do that. I want to talk to you today about living with mystery, and to set the scene for that I'm going to read a few verses from the prophet Isaiah, and Isaiah chapter 40, a really well-known chapter which speaks about the wonder of God. And just a few verses here from verse 12 to verse 14. Who else has held the oceans in his hand? Who has measured off the heavens with his fingers? Who else knows the weight of the earth, or has weighed the mountains and hills on a scale? Who knows enough to give him advice or teach him? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? Does he need instruction about what is good? Did someone teach him what is right or show him the path of justice? These verses and the verses that follow them in Isaiah chapter 40 are painting a picture for us of the enormity of God. And I'm sure, like me, that you have found it difficult sometimes to understand everything about God. He is so vast, he is so immense. Probably much like me, you've had many questions, and probably still do, that you would love answers to, that remain just unanswered questions about God and who he is and the way he works. And you wouldn't be on your own. We all very much find ourselves in that position. I think of the hymn writer who wrote those great words that I grew up singing, and sometimes we might still sing now. Immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light inaccessible, hid from our eyes, most blessed, most glorious, the Ancient of Days, almighty victorious, thy great name we praise. And those words begin to paint a picture of something and someone so far outside of our understanding it becomes a huge challenge, because in so many ways God remains a mystery to us. One of the Old Testament characters who came to understand that so clearly was Moses. And Moses is on Mount Sinai, and he is about to encounter God, but God makes it very clear that he's going to hide Moses from seeing his face. We read it in Exodus chapter 33, verses 19 to 20. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But, he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. How immense a moment that must have felt for Moses as he's hidden in the rocks as God passes behind him, because the glory of God is just too great for Moses to see. The biblical scholar and writer, a man called Thomas Wynandy, expressed this about that situation for Moses. Moses must have quickly realized that in knowing God more fully, God had become an even greater mystery than he was before. And I don't know about you, but I found that in my experience of God. There have been some moments I've thought, wow, a revelation, something about God, and yet as I've thought more about it, I've realised I haven't begun to tap into the depths of the greatness of God. And those who went before us, the people we call the early church fathers, who back in the early centuries of the church were founding the faith that we now live in, and the creeds and those things that express what we know about God. And one of those was Augustine, who lived around 400 AD. And he said this: we're speaking of God. Is it any wonder if we do not comprehend? For if you comprehend, it is not God you comprehend. To attain some slight knowledge of God is a great blessing. To comprehend him, however, is a total impossibility. You see, the essential argument of atheism is that God cannot exist because he cannot be proved. There's no proof that God exists, atheism says. Yet that's the beauty of what we call theism. those of us who believe in a God. Because what we say is that we believe God by faith. We put our trust in what God has revealed of himself in creation around us and in revelation to us as individuals and the experiences of God that have shaped our lives. It is our faith that convinces us God is real. And mystery is always never present for us because there are limits to our humanity. When we talk about God, we often talk about God being infinite. And the word simply means without limits or boundaries. And we often think about humanity, the human race, as finite. It means that we have limits, we have boundaries beyond which it's so impossible for us to think or comprehend. And in my own journey, I've learned to become so much more comfortable with the mystery that there is in God. I've learned to celebrate what God has revealed of himself, but also to continue to pursue him because I know there is yet more that I can discover. And I've been a follower of Jesus for nearly 50 years, since I was a little boy. And what we know about God, ultimately, is what God has chosen to make known to us. It's his self-revelation, what he's revealed of himself to us. He's determined certain things about him that we can know. And Jesus comes into our world as the revelation of who God is. In Hebrews 1, we find out that the Hebrew writer tells us that Jesus is the exact representation of God's being. And Jesus actually comes telling us that if we want to know what God is like, to look at him. For example, when Matthew writes the words of Jesus in Matthew 11:27, he records Jesus saying this: "All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him." And so what we find is that many of the answers we're searching for are found in Jesus. He becomes the revelation of God to us. He shows us what God is like, what God would say in any given situation, how God responds to particular people, and the range of people that Jesus engaged with and met, spoke to, helped, is represented in our culture and our society today. And in Jesus, we see how God is and who God is. Because the answers we search for are found in Jesus. And this is a thing that the Apostle Paul picks up when he writes to the church in a place called Colossae. And it's Colossians in our Bible. And this letter is written to people to reveal something of who Jesus is. And in chapter 2, just a couple of verses 2 and 3, the Apostle Paul writes this: "My goal is that they may be encouraged in heart and united in love, so that they may have the full riches of complete understanding, in order that they may know the mystery of God, namely Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge." And here Paul tells us Jesus is who reveals God to us. He is the mystery of God, and yet he comes to make that mystery a little clearer for you and for me. And that's why it's so important we understand the reality of who Jesus is, that we pick up our Bibles and we go through the Gospels and we ask God to show us who he is in the person of Jesus. But there's a few things that this journey of mystery have taught me that I'm hoping I can pass on to you in this short message. The first of those is that mystery inspires me to wonder. Not wonder in the sense of a question mark, but wonder in the sense of an exclamation mark. I'm aghast. I'm caught in awe at something of what I experience of God. And that's what I was reading to you from Isaiah 40 and verse 12. Let me read it to you from the NIV this time, which says, "Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand? Or the breadth of his hand has measured off the heavens? Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on the scales and the hills in a balance?" I don't know about you, but I find myself absolutely captivated by the enormity of God. On those occasional times when we get the kind of night sky that we can see the stars, it's astonishing. But if we utilize the advantage of things like the internet to search for some of the images of the universe beyond us and the universes beyond that, the galaxies of stars, it's mind-blowing. That's all we can say, isn't it? How great and how big our God really is. And you know, knowing or not knowing everything rather inspires this sense of childlike wonder in me. I realize that he is God and I am a created being called to be his child, but I can't begin to understand and capture this enormity. It's so wonderful. John Calvin, who was a 16th century theologian and pastor in Switzerland, he once wrote this when he's trying to explain something of the enormity of God. He said, "We know the most perfect way of seeking God and the most suitable order is not for us to attempt with bold curiosity to penetrate to the investigation of his essence, which we ought more to adore than meticulously search out, but for us to contemplate him in his works, whereby he renders himself near and familiar to us, and in some manner communicates himself." Now, in those times, they spoke sometimes, didn't they, with a more complicated form of language. I think what he's essentially saying is don't get caught up with trying to understand all of God. See him in the wonder of his creation and then worship him. Back in 2016, my eldest son, Matthew, married a beautiful Norwegian girl called Ingvild. They met in Australia and they were getting married in Norway, her homeland. And just a couple of hours inland from where Ingvild grew up is one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. It's called the Geiranger Fjord. It's a UNESCO site of outstanding natural beauty. And in the build-up to their wedding, we travelled there with Ingvild's family 4 days before the wedding just to look at the venue and to meet the minister who was going to look after the ceremony. And this beautiful fjord is mind-blowing. It's stunning, from huge high mountains to beautiful deep fjords of crystal clear blue water. It was mind-blowing. And the first song that my son and daughter-in-law chose for their wedding was the great hymn, "How Great Thou Art." Now, I was given the privilege not only of speaking at the wedding, but leading much of the ceremony by an incredibly kind Norwegian priest called Morgan. And so as I introduced the singing of this hymn in a little chapel just up the hill at the cusp, at the very mouth of this fjord, I remember saying to the gathered congregation, you know, I've sung this hymn so many times in my childhood and throughout my adult life, but I've never sung it in a place more beautiful and where it's more naturally right to sing it. O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the works thy hand hath made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Friends, wonder is the very heart of worship. Mystery is the heart of worship, the excitement that we can't comprehend all of God, but we can bow in humble worship before him. The second lesson I've learned about mystery is that it urges me to seek. Mystery urges me to seek. You know, God does not hide from us so that he cannot be found. He urges us to seek him so that he can make himself known to us, because there is so much to be gained in the very act of seeking him. Think right back into the beginning of our Bible account in the book of Genesis. And it talks to us there in Genesis about the first creation and Adam and Eve. And we know that as beautiful as that was and as wonderful as Adam and Eve's creation was, things went wrong and Adam and Eve fell and they sinned against God. And there's this beautiful passage that talks about how the Lord would come in the cool of the night and walk in the garden to meet with Adam and Eve. What a wonderful picture of God's desire to be close to us. But as a result of their sin and failure, Adam is hiding from God. And God walks into the garden, and there's this funny little passage. I find it funny where it says that God says, Adam, where are you? Now, what's funny about it for me is that God is all-knowing. We use the phrase omniscient when we talk about that. He knows everything. So he knew where Adam was hiding. It wasn't that God was struggling to find him like I might with my granddaughter who suddenly goes and finds a hiding place that I didn't know she was hiding before when we're playing together. No, God knew where she was. Where Adam was. No, he was giving Adam the opportunity to step out and seek after God's help and seek God's forgiveness and be confident in what God brings to him. Isaiah the prophet said in his letter, in his book, Isaiah 55 verse 6, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. A mystery urges us to seek after God. There's the great prayer of the early saint, St. Anselm, who said, for I do not seek to understand so that I may believe, but I believe so that I may understand. Because it takes faith and courage to seek out God in the mystery of who he is. I'm sure if your journey has been quite short with God, or if, like me, it's been a long journey, you've grown in your understanding of God over years, in small steps, during experiences of your life. God has become ever more real and close to you. But not a million lifetimes of seeking him would cause us to ever find out who he truly is. In fact, I believe that eternity will be a wonderful exploration of the magnificence and enormity of God for us. But we press on to know him. We seek after him because there is so much more to know. It excites our faith whether you've walked with the Lord like me for decades or just for days. I want you to know there is continually more that we can seek to know of God in our lives. But the final thing I want to encourage you in when we think about the mystery of God is that mystery asks us to trust. It's not a blind trust. It's not a trust in something that is utterly unknown, because God has revealed himself to us in so many ways through creation, through his word. But it's a trust nevertheless in an invisible God, which is challenging at times, that we don't get to see with our human eyes God. And yet that to me is not as big a problem as maybe in times past it might have been. Again, Isaiah, in the same passage I quoted just earlier, in verses 8 and 9, talks from God and says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. What we don't know asks us to trust in the goodness and the faithfulness of God. I love how David the psalmist finishes Psalm 23 when he says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You see, what we cannot know of God and what seems invisible and uncertain to us, we nevertheless can trust a God who is good and faithful. I want you to know that all the years I've walked with the Lord, through many joys and many distresses, I've found him true and faithful. When I think of who God is to me today and my family, I cannot help but wonder at the magnificence of God's goodness and his faithfulness. Friends, we stand on his word. This is true. Jesus said, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will remain. How God has revealed himself to us. And all the years I've studied this book as a pastor and preacher and dwelt time in it as a disciple listening to the Lord, I found it true and speaks into the complexity of our modern world and the complexity of my life. We stand on the revelation of his character that we see in Jesus, the heart of God, and the true reality of the integrity and honesty of God. And we stand on the confidence of his ways and how he works. He is just, he is faithful. After all, I'm not sure I want to follow a God that I can completely understand. If somehow my small human mind, not the greatest in the world, but if my human mind could conceive everything of God, then he would not be sufficient for all that I need. He wouldn't be the answer for our world's cosmic, complex crises. He wouldn't be the peace and the hope that we need. He wouldn't be the solution for all that's happening in the world around us. It is the enormity, the mystery, the wonder, what we do not know of God, that can feed our trust and confidence in his ability to be the answer to all our needs. The mysteries that surrounds him helps me to be confident that he is more than. He's more than I can imagine. He's more than I can know. He's more than all my needs. I don't know about you, but this mystery excites me to believe in the wonder of the life to come, the promise of eternity. It lifts me from my earthbound existence and perspective to allow my imagination to think of a dimension way beyond anything that this three-dimensional world gives to me. I want to encourage you today, as I draw to a close, to say to you that doubt is not sin, doubt is human. To doubt is just to be human. It's to realise that there are boundaries to our understanding and our thinking. And we reach those boundaries and we can't comprehend, but we lean back into the faithfulness and we trust in God. Because knowing God is not just an intellectual exercise. It's not about how much you know about God, but it's about how much you experience of God. So my encouragement to you today is to let the mystery that is in God bring you to worship him. Let the mystery that is in God spur you on to seek him once more. And let the mystery in God teach you that he is bigger than all of your needs, all of your challenges, all of your problems, all that you're facing, because he is God, God of the heavens, God of the earth. And so I pray today in the name of Jesus that you would capture a fresh sense of wonder at the beauty and the magnificence of God, that even in the challenges you might be facing, you can pause and say, I know you are God, I know you're greater than me and you are good, and I trust you today that you know what you're doing in my life. And let the mystery of God excite your soul. There is yet more to discover in him. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for listening. It's been a joy to share with you. I pray God's blessing over you, over the church, over your life. God bless.